really explode the economy in a good way with the appropriate kinds of tax reform and regulatory reform. Because, the government should be a facilitator. We should be creating the right kind of atmosphere. And for instance, obviously, if we have amongst the highest corporate taxes in the world, obviously we're going to be driving people away. So let's just put our thinking caps on and say, how do we attract them back? So obviously lowering the corporate tax rate in a very significant way and bringing that back, getting rid of the regulatory burdens that don't make sense. And I'm not one of those people who says get rid of all regulations. Some regulations are important because there are greedy people, there are unscrupulous people, and we have to protect those people. But what's happened in our society, in almost all of our agencies, is instead of replacing a regulation with a better regulation, we just stack it on top of it. So now to get from point A to point B instead of a straight line, it becomes a very complex labyrinth, which takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And by getting that down to a reasonable level, we will attract a tremendous amount of business. It's already starting to happen.
The Republican Party has, I think, struggled with the message on tax reform. And in the Bush tax cuts, basically the message was everyone's going to get a tax cut. But the Republican Party has gone back and forth on whether it's going to help the wealthy. You were in a televised interview and you said, well, listen, the people who are paying the most taxes deserve a tax break. Do you think that the message should be that it's going to help everyone and that's going to help the economy? I mean, there has to be a better message on taxes than there was on health care.
Well, I think we need to stop engaging in the class warfare stuff. This is a country that has all kinds of people in it. Rich people, poor people, people in the middle. We're all in the same boat, quite frankly. And part of those things, the rest of it's going out too. And we need to stop allowing ourselves to be divided up. I know people who are not wealthy at all who are very, very happy. And I know people who are very wealthy who are very unhappy. That wealth has nothing to do with happiness. But, fairness is something that should go across all lines. That's why I love things that are proportional. You make $10 billion, you pay $1 billion. You make $10, you pay $1. Everybody has skin in the game. The guy who makes a ton of money is putting a ton of money back in. It just makes so much sense. As soon as you start deviating away, then you start bringing your own biases into the situation.
How much of your team is at HUD, and are you satisfied with how the Senate has approved nominations? Yours was a little bit delayed as well.
No, I'm not satisfied with that at all. But we just deal with it. I mean, there's really no, I think, there's a lot of politics that goes into this. I mean, we can delay this, we can keep this agenda from being done. People need to realize that the agendas affect all Americans. They don't just affect Republicans or Democrats. And, I'm very hopeful that the American people will be, as Thomas Jefferson said they would be. He would say we would reach a point in our society where we were about to change into another system of government. And he said that people would be smart enough to recognize what they were about to do, and they would do the right thing. And I have great confidence in the American people. They're a lot smarter than the so-called political elites think they are.
What is HUD doing on the California wildfires?
Well, that's been a big issue. We've been out assessing situations. Something like 6,800 homes were destroyed. And we recognize that a lot of an average cost was over $600,000. So, these are expensive homes. And a lot of them are owned by people who are elderly, who have actually paid off their mortgage. As a result of that, unfortunately, they allow their insurance to lapse. So we have a very significant problem there.
What kind of relief can they get?
Well, FEMA is, as the first responder, going to be responsible for some of the relief, but obviously they can't remediate the entire thing. And we will be there, obviously, to help over the long run.
Senator Hatch and Cantwell have a new bill to expand the housing credit by 50%. Would you support that?
I think it's certainly worthy of significant discussion. And I never like to jump headlong into something without a very significant discussion. Which brings me to another point. I think almost all the issues and problems that we have can be resolved. People from the different parties, the different sides, they get in their respective corners and they shout at each other. But really, if you get down to the nitty-gritty, they're not that far apart. And if they would just be willing to sit down and have the discussion and talk about what is it you're trying to achieve, what is it that I'm trying to achieve. And you don't necessarily have to compromise your principles, but you can certainly compromise your methods when you live in a multifaceted society in which everybody has to get along.
How often, you mentioned you're talking to the Attorney General and the Treasury Department, how often are you talking to other cabinet officials to coordinate all your policies?
A lot.
A lot.
I think this cabinet probably has more cross-silo connections than any in history. And it's so easy now to just pick up the phone and call whoever, and we all get along just great. I think that's going to be one of the reasons that a lot of things are going to get done.
You created a bit of a stir when you put out a statement about Roy Moore in the Alabama Senate race. It wasn't an endorsement, but why did you put that statement out? Knowing him a long time?
I've known him a long time, and he's a man who really believes in the Judeo-Christian foundation of our country, and that's something that I strongly believe in. And I think a lot about values, principles, character. I think those things are very, very important. And I think it's something that we really need to be talking about more. We've sort of allowed political correctness to say, well, there's nothing that's really right, nothing that's really wrong, it's all relative. As you may remember, there was another great society that used to do the same thing, the Roman Empire. I don't think that's a good model.
Do you think the media has been fair to the Trump administration?
No.
Why?
Because no matter what he says or does, they criticize. I mean, look at what happened recently. You're calling, a ghost our wife, and trying to comfort. I mean, you wouldn't call someone to insult them. You would call someone to try to comfort them. And you say, he knew what he was getting into, and that makes me admire him even more because he was willing to sacrifice for his fellow Americans. I'm sure that was the intention of the conversation, but when we're always looking to be critical of everything, how can we ever be in a position to protect ourselves in an increasingly dangerous world when we have people like Kim Jong-un developing a nuclear program and missiles, who has the ability to sell this stuff to people who are not going to be constrained by this mutual destruction. These are the kinds of things that we need to be concerning ourselves about. We need to be thinking about what kind of defense systems that we can build, what kinds of things we can do to preserve, the peace and tranquility and the prosperity that exists in this country, instead of picking at each other all the time. It's almost like a little cartoon with all these people on this bank, and there's a giant getting ready to squash them. I mean, it just boggles the mind that we could do that.
critical, so do you think there was just a miscommunication because as you said that the president called with an intent? Do you just think that that was taken the wrong way, or the politics?
Well, I think that there were people who were just looking for something to complain about. I mean, if he had said, sorry, this is sure a dark day for you, they would have said, he's a racist, it's a dark day. I mean, it's crazy the way we have gone. And if we just keep going back and forth, lurching from left to right, we're never going to make any forward progress. And that's what concerns me the most. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And we've got to be able to get beyond just criticizing each other all the time and creating all this havoc in our society. We have problems that we can solve. In the housing arena, in the last 15 years, we've gone from 800,000 homeless to 550. A 47% decrease recently in homeless veterans. Multiple towns and cities declaring victory over homelessness. This is something that we can solve in this country. Let's concentrate on those kinds of issues. We can do this.
Last question, you ran a very successful presidential campaign. Do you think there's any chance you could run for elected office again?
It would require something that I can't even imagine.
You had your fill.
No desire whatsoever.
Well, Dr. Carson, please thank Dr. Carson. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you.
But the family was critical, so do you think there was just a miscommunication because as you said that the president called with an intent? Do you just think that that was taken the wrong way, or the politics?
Well, I think that there were people who were just looking for something to complain about. I mean, if he had said, sorry, this is sure a dark day for you, they would have said, he's a racist, it's a dark day. I mean, it's crazy the way we have gone. And if we just keep going back and forth, lurching from left to right, we're never going to make any forward progress. And that's what concerns me the most. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And we've got to be able to get beyond just criticizing each other all the time and creating all this havoc in our society. We have problems that we can solve. In the housing arena, in the last 15 years, we've gone from 800,000 homeless to 550. A 47% decrease recently in homeless veterans. Multiple towns and cities declaring victory over homelessness. This is something that we can solve in this country. Let's concentrate on those kinds of issues. We can do this.
Last question, you ran a very successful presidential campaign. Do you think there's any chance you could run for elected office again?
It would require something that I can't even imagine.
You had your fill.
No desire whatsoever.
Well, Dr. Carson, please thank Dr. Carson. I'll hand it back to you.